While it might not be the most common question that I receive, I do know that many people during recovery process, they read stuff, they read books, they try different teachings, different authors. So this is a very common situation for many people navigating this path. And there are a lot of books out there. There are books on psychology, there are books on spirituality, and it's not uncommon to hear from someone that they've been reading this and this and this book, and then something helped and something didn't help, and so on and so forth. And the problem I stumbled upon is something that I personally experienced. That when I was in recovery, I would start a book, and at first I would be very intrigued with it. I would get a lot of helpful ideas that I resonated with. But then after some time, I would stumble upon certain chapter of the book which didn't really sit well with me. Maybe it's a technique or anything like this that just didn't feel right. And then I would get confused for some reason. Then I would pick another book. The same thing basically happens. At first, I find it very helpful. Then I read to a certain point that something doesn't sit well, and then again, I kind of like feel frustrated that there is nothing that really fully, resonates with me 100%. And then by the end of like my consumption of all possible psychology books and whatnot, I would be left very confused and not knowing where to go. So this video is exactly about this particular problem, because I know that I was not alone experiencing this thing. Some people who reached out to me, they had a very similar problem, and with this video I really hope to clarify this aspect. I'm going to share with you my insights, my learnings that might help you benefit from reading whatever books that you're reading. Like usually it's this nonfiction, self-help type of like category, but without taking you off the track, without confusing you so much. So I hope that you will find this video helpful. Let's cut right to the chase. And here's the thing that I've learned throughout the whole this process is that I haven't seen one book or one person, one resource that would 100% be like I would agree 100% with everything. There were certain resources that would be like 99% like yes, and then there's 1% like I'm not sure about that. And here's the thing, that it is super common, and I'm just gonna give you an example. One of the first books I read on insomnia recovery was the book from Sasha Stevens, which was called The Effortless Sleep Method, and I really enjoyed the book. Majority of it, when I started reading, it gave me so much hope. It gave me so much encouragement. I was like, yes, this is it. This is what I'm going through. It felt very, very helpful until one chapter when I got to the part where she suggests writing down affirmations, something like I'm a great sleeper, I'm blah blah blah, whatever it is, some sort of like positive reframing. And for some reason that particular advice didn't sit well with me, because I was in so much suffering, so much emotional and physical pain, that to me writing down on paper that I'm a perfect sleeper, it just didn't feel believable. And so I tried to do this kind of exercise for quite some time, and every time I would get so frustrated, so miserable inside, and then I would get kind of frustrated with the whole this like a book. But the thing is that 90% of the book was actually really good, really good information, except for that 10%. And so instead of completely tossing the whole thing and just saying like, okay, this is just nonsense, another book that didn't work, didn't help, I started actually accepting the fact that there won't be a book that will be fully customized to my needs, and that's okay, because we are all different. Person who creates the content, writes the book, they're also people, and so they also went through their personal experience, and it doesn't mean that our preference must match theirs 100%. So I actually started accepting that there won't be a book that will be 100% perfect for me. And even without that kind of like a complete match, I can still benefit from certain parts of the books. So what I did was that I started being more eclectic in my education, meaning that I would, let's say, if I find something that resonates, then I would take what really clicks and I would leave out the rest. I would kind of like not try to force it on myself. So I was kind of cherry picking things and putting together my own kind of like a pool of ideas that truly resonate with me, that truly kind of like land, and didn't insist that it has to like everything has to fit. So that actually reduced so much pressure. It opened kind of like a path forward, because I knew that even, you know, even if the book I'm reading, that there will be some part which I'm not really agreeing with, or it doesn't really resonate with me. I don't have to force myself to make it work. I can just leave it out, and maybe later on I would be more ready to for that particular teaching, or maybe not. That's okay. So that's how I started approaching it, and it made things so much easier. Then I was getting confused less. I knew that, okay, I can just focus on things that truly resonate with me and not really insist on, make it work 100% for me, that a particular book. And the reason for that, why it is helpful, is because your recovery, like every person's recovery, is not in books themselves. It's not in people. It's not in coaches, and it's also not even in this channel that I'm making. The recovery process is something that happens within ourselves, and books, articles, videos, whatever, they're just pointers, but they're not the recovery itself. So recovery happens within. It's what you are doing with this information, how you are using it, and that's where actual change happens. So you are in the driver's seat of your recovery process, and you can actually keep things that kind of like make sense, that stick, and uh, leave for later anything else that doesn't. So that can really reduce a lot of pressure. Now, another thing that I wanted to include in this video is the topic of spirituality in insomnia recovery process. Quite often we find that there's certain similarities with the things that we are talking about here: acceptance, befriending wakefulness, letting go of the effort, and so on and so on. We meet the same kind of concepts also in spiritual books. For example, Eckhart Tolle, Michael Singer, whatever, spiritual teachers, writers. And it is true that there are a lot of things they're basically mirroring. We are talking about the same thing. However, what I noticed is that for some people, this could be a very subtle trap, because usually the spirituality teachings, they use a very vague language. They use things like, ego and identity, and letting, so they have a lot of like their own principles, their own concepts, and usually those concepts, they're kind of like vague. It's not really specific, and these are the places where our controlling mind tends to hide. And so, for example, sometimes a person like reads that, okay, now I need to abandon my ego, or whatever, like transform my ego, whatever the language is being used here, and then they use it as a way to end insomnia. Then they set on a very long, sometimes lifelong journey of spirituality as a tool to overcome insomnia. But then they notice that their ego, whatever that means, is still there, their thoughts are still there, their mind is still there, and then they might feel pressured that they are not recovering because they haven't conquered their ego, or haven't completely changed their minds, and so on and so forth. And this is the topic when it can get a little bit like, we can get a little bit stuck. It's very difficult for me to discuss this, because first of all, again, like, I personally like reading spiritual books, or psychology books, and all of that. It's one of the areas of interest. However, I notice that sometimes our brain can use that as a form of keep fighting keep fighting, wakefulness and trying to avoid certain things. So I just wanted to really point out that sometimes it can happen. So if you started noticing that the more you started reading about spirituality, the more your recovery journey kind of started to feel a bit muddy, that happens. That's normal. You haven't done anything like wrong. We can kind of like overcome this hurdle as well. And sometimes when a person really asks me what sort of like books on this like topic of thoughts and then mind is helpful, sometimes I do share this, but I try to present it as like, okay, it's better not to use it as a way to, like, as a main tool to overcome insomnia, because sometimes the mind can really latch onto those spiritual teachings and make the whole process about overcoming our ego and so on and so forth. Well, in reality, what we are really doing, we are still avoiding wakefulness. We are still running away from it. Now we are just using spirituality as a tool to do that avoidance. So just to, be mindful that can happen. And what I find more helpful is not to now abandon all the stuff, like stop reading spiritual books or stop reading like some psychological self-help books. Rather look at it more as a separate interest that we have. So what I did during my recovery process is that I really separated my interest for psychology and my learning journey of in terms of like recovery, insomnia recovery. So I didn't use psychology, I didn't use spirituality as a way to overcome insomnia. I used it as something that, okay, I'm interested in that, and I'm not trying to make myself like fix insomnia from those readings alone. So I really kind of like separated. I kept it as an interest, something that I can do, let's say, to like when I cannot sleep, I can just read about psychology, but not in a way to work on my insomnia recovery, but rather as something just to fill the time, to befriend wakefulness, so to speak. So definitely there is a way to kind of like work together. The only thing is like when we start interconnecting those two things, when we are using spirituality as a way to overcome insomnia. So that's just one of the things to be mindful of. And it might happen that you've already kind of like you're already in this experience that you've read a lot of different books. Each person suggested you certain angles, maybe certain techniques, concepts, and so on and so forth. So now you are surrounded with a huge pool of different ideas, and I can totally understand that it might feel overwhelming. You might just not know what to do with all that, and so you might be trying to fit it all together, make it all work, and then you're getting more and more confused. That happened to me, and it happens quite often on this journey for many people. So I just want to kind of share what might be helpful in this situation when we are already confused. Usually the best thing in those moments is to simplify and go back to the basics. And for me, the basics are actually understanding how insomnia really works. And for that, I have a video which is basically like it's titled something like with a paradox, the insomnia paradox. And I think this is a great place to start. However, whatever you consider to be like basics of insomnia recovery, that could be this kind of like day one teaching. So yeah, going back to the basics from time to time when we get too, like when we have our recovery journey got too complicated, we go back to simplicity, back to the basics. And sometimes we might remind ourselves of things like hyperarousal and how it affects our sleep, that the more we chase sleep, the more elusive it becomes, the nature of sleep being passive and beyond our control. So basically going back to the original stuff, that could be helpful. That could help us kind of like recenter our understanding and help us move forward. So it's not really a big problem, even if we find ourselves a little bit confused by different teachings, by different books. We can always go back to the basics and revisit that. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it brought some clarity. And I also want to invite you guys to visit my recently opened resource, which is Fearless Sleep Library. This is the place where I post more content, more in-depth, kind of like nuanced posts and articles and videos. We also host there once a month Q&A session, so there's a lot more happening in that space. So if you find this content interesting and want to dive deeper into this, I'm just inviting you to join that space, and I'm going to share links in the description. So thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day.